uh, I mean, if you keep on adding complexity here, it will become more and more complex, So what Ashish, for example, yesterday for our own self-reflection, if you have those, under those 5 spheres, if you have those sub-questions, and if you just distribute that among the core group members and also ask them to take it to the communities and see how the communities are living those values or not. If they are not living them, then maybe they need an alternative, just there to put that on the ground, the concept that we had thought about. So I think that would be a first step to really see.
No, I'm sorry, I disagree with that. Yeah. Why? As a self-assessment tool, we can ask ourselves right now within this core group whether we are actually espousing the values that we are setting ourselves. Right? Okay, I get that.
Yeah.
But if I take that down to, let us say, community level, even a grassroots civil society organization or a community-based organization, and I ask them these, maybe they're not binaries, but I ask them these value judgment of whether they're living up to this value or this principle or not.
Yeah.
Okay, I get a yes or no answer, a maybe answer, but what does one do with it? You get me? The importance of whether I am on the right side of this principle or not, so to speak.
Right.
What is that? How do I explain that? Do you understand the issue I'm positing here? Let us take something like, do I practice enough diversity within my organization? Okay?
So yeah, I mean, I would look like, for example, there's we talk about the economic democracy, for example, So we take that to the ground level and see in the community whatever they are doing, do they have the economic democracy, so to speak, that's what is listed in one of the main spheres. So if they are not practicing then that, the economic democracy, then something needs to be done there, on our own level, within our communities that we are working with. So I'm just basically to see if there is something kind of validated there also among the communities.
I'm sorry, Ashish, you were saying?
I just mentioned an experience that we're currently undergoing, trying to do this, which is the Kutch process that I mentioned. So there, we didn't actually go in with the questionnaire as it is. The format as it is, or the process, the framework document as it is. What we did is, and this was facilitated by some of the local groups, Sushma Iyengar in particular, who's a member of the core group, was to talk about relationships. So she engaged the workers, the weavers, in a discussion about relationships. What was the relationship, what was and is the relationship of the Vankar to the Vana, that is the act of weaving. So the weaver's relationship with the act of weaving. What is the relationship of the weaver the weaver community with the pastoralist community and the farmer community? What was it? What is it now? What was the relationship of the weaver community with the rest of nature? And what is it now? What was the relationship of the weaver community with the state? What is it now? And we start, so basically what she was saying was that if we translate all of this into relationships, sambandh, rishte, it's the sort of language which immediately people connect to.
Agreed.
Okay. Now in that you can start then beginning to tease out issues of inequality, unsustainability, injustice.
That's what we do in
Sorry? So, and the opposite of all of those, which is what we want to move towards. And then slowly, one actually starts introducing also some of the questions as they are in the format. So it depends really on the situation. Now that works there. Some other approach might work in a very different way somewhere else. What they have found there of use is the fact that there is these two documents, the framework note and this alternative transformation format which I mentioned, which they can use in their own heads as a background to initiate these conversations. Now they're saying this works with the weavers, it may not work with another community in this way, maybe it has to be in some other form.
Correct. So this answers one part of my question in the sense that in a specific cultural, social context, it's obviously work to carry this particular path through to explain some of these values and ideas. And
yeah, but I was going to answer the second part, then what then? Now the what then is the thing that once we start initiating a conversation like this, and the weavers and or Khamir and or Kalpavriksha realize as part of these conversations that there are certain aspects of what we are doing which are creating greater injustice or creating greater ecological disasters or unsustainability. Maybe there will be some churning within ourselves which will say, okay, maybe we need to change this practice or that behavior in order to be more just or more sustainable. So that's the action part. Subsequent to this kind of discussion which churns our own thoughts and so on. So that's what we are hoping is happening, and actually already there's some discussion happening within the weavers on some of these aspects. Now whether that leads to final action or not is of course
Correct.
It's finally up to them whether they want to do it or not. But it's the same thing within Kalpavriksha. When we use that format within Kalpavriksha, we realized that there were things that we hadn't even realized were problematic, or had realized it but never really focused our minds to it. So then we're hoping that, for instance, just a simple example, in our own office, we knew and realized more sharply when we did this exercise that there are some things that, we're still using detergents, for instance, right? And so there's a group that's been set up to see, okay, how can the Kalpavriksha office itself become far more ecologically sensitive? So, these are examples of how one can use these kinds of things.
I think there are two distinct paradigms which arrive, through which you arrive at the same position of, say, an amendment of your actions. One is what Ram kind of thought. Okay, it's a more project. Okay, we've got to get the world changing, and therefore tell us what is the next step. And Sangeeta seems and Walter seem to be saying that, okay, no, leave the project aside. There is us as a part, not apart from, but one same part of that change that we are talking about, and therefore what it is doing to us. And you can come to this position from what he says, a change in your lifestyle from both these positions, right? So I find myself always oscillating between these two. When I'm in more meditative, whatever situations, I'm like this, and when I'm, in my project mode or whatever, in my work mode, I do it this way. So we must recognize this particular thing, and perhaps even as an organization, not organized, as a movement or a sangam, many of us are this way, that way, kind of plus minus. Okay. So now I think we must recognize that this is there, and that certain times this kind of Ravi kind of thing, whereas in the last core group meeting, he was coming from the second paradigm, what your paradigm. But today is coming with Walter kind of or Sangeeta kind of paradigm. He's oscillating between these two. The problem comes actually when we are discussing in one plane. In order to come to a conclusion from it, somebody comes and speaks about the other plane, and we are not really able to talk to each other or relate this thing, because there's a jump, because we can't jump together, you see, because we don't have an idiom. Like in other process work, for example, there is somebody who facilitates a kind of a process and a kind of a idiom which puts us on the same plane. And then, for example, if Ashish is there, then he will bring us through his introduction to another plane. Yeah?
Because I'm also thinking of the myriad themes we are working on, the regional groupings, the social groupings we are trying to do Vikalp Sangams with, and I just want what we are saying to be coherent across all that. It can't, you're absolutely right, it can't oscillate between these two types of directions, because that tends to confuse rather than clarify, I think.
I hear you're saying, Ashish, that conversation is very interesting. In touch what's going on. I see that there's a fork you're sitting at with that. When the conversation around relationships starts, that is a very profound way to enter into a cosmological conversation. And it could also take you back into a, practical, what are my, again, technical solutions? How am I going to change my detergent, or how I'm going to do this? But what I'm saying is the crisis is that it's easier to go towards that way. And what happens, at least my experience, it ends up anyways that people are, whatever's somewhat convenient for them to take forward, they do. And the rest are sitting there, those questions that we live with all of these paradoxes that we can't fully reconcile from this list of things. So how do we move, my question, how do we move that? If the journey has taken us to this place where we are with the community, talking about relationships, how does that move into a much deeper cosmological question, a worldview set of questions and conversations? That's my concern, is that we don't keep veering the other way. We need to have both. But our training, our conditioning is taking us always this other way.
I'm not sure that I agree with that. I don't think everybody is always taking the easy way out at all. I just gave detergents as an example. As I said, it's a simple example. But there are far more complex things that are part of it, and people do actually engage with those more complex things. The relationships discussion with the Kutch weavers is actually bringing up, it's just very recently started, so I obviously can't say very much about it yet. But it's already bringing up, for instance, they have this tradition of what they call Nirgud. Nirgud, which is like, thing of simplicity. It's a bunch of things. Now it's come up already in the conversation, okay, that the previous generation used to live with that worldview. The current generation appears to have either abandoned it or modified it or whatever. Can the conversation come back? One of the things that the elder weavers have said is that if we can actually start as part of this process, start documenting what were the views, what was our worldview about weaving also. Forget the rest of nature, etc. But just even about weaving, how did we view the loom? And if those things can be documented and shared with our youngsters, perhaps, not about going back to what it was, but perhaps there will be some changes in the ways the youth today, the weaver youth, looks at weaving, at society, at nature, and so on. So there's a readiness for that. How much can happen is, of course, a big open question for all of us. But it's not at all about, for instance, okay, then should we just change the handloom in such a way that it becomes ecologically more sensitive? That's what we have, but it's not just that. So if your concern is that we're not going into them, I agree that very often that happens. But I think this process, let me put it this way, I think this process must lend itself to that more complex and more difficult task of heart-mind behavior, and not just technical solutions.
I have two responses. One is much more specifically to what Manish said, or even before that Walter said. I'm getting a little more uneasy with some of the comments and suggestions. And then because I think we need to accept that all of us have come from different worldviews to some extent, and methodologies and rationalities. And I think we need to accept that and build from there. Now, for example, I would say that what Manish said, that for example, relationship is the much deeper thing, and that gives the whole cosmology and worldviews and other things. Is one viewpoint. But
that's one way.
One way, yeah. We will exercise in one way, but there are different ways. But that's not the only way, or that's not the deepest way. Because I would say that the person who is involved into material production, the whole process of production, utpadan, that also gives a certain type of worldview that is equally deeper or deep as something. I think unfortunately in Indian history, what has happened is that the worldviews of people who really work with the hands and legs, and their worldview, their rationalities have never been taken into account in building this whole larger picture. It has been people who have been able to abstract out things. To say the whole class basis is that. So I think let's not make this type of very judgmental type of. I'm not saying you made it. Sorry if I'm not saying. But sometimes we get into that type of thing. This is a deeper and this is not deeper. But for me, for example, if let's say I'm a farmer, I come with certain worldviews and have certain rationalities of looking at the world. So I think that is equally deep for me as like I can abstract out things or relationship and that sort of thing. So I think all these are important to build a larger cosmology and a larger world. We are different people have different starting points and different rations of looking at the world or making sense of what's happening around us. So I think we need to be relative in all these things. Otherwise, it becomes a little problematic because I may not take the route which you are saying. For example, this internal and relationship and other things. It's important to me as a person, but I may not reduce everything into that.
I think we're actually saying the same thing. The critique is against a technocratic framework, which very radically reduces the possibilities for what you're raising. I think I fully agree with what you're saying. But I'm saying, does the technocratic framework that we're using take us into those level of conversations? That's what I'm questioning.
Yeah, so the second point is about this, the framework note and the type of thing. I think the way I look at it, we have different needs to reach to different, let's say, whether the type of communities or different type of things. Now, for example, this note I am very comfortable with, and I don't call it as a techno-managerial document.
It's actually explicitly anti-techno-managerial.
Yeah, I don't call it as a techno-managerial at all.
I'm not sure you read it properly.
Yeah.
I've read it.
Let me come with my point.
It's explicitly anti-technocratic.
Yeah.
It says so.
I agree with Ashish on that, and I would say that the type of different layers of people we work with or we are part of have got different needs. Now, for example, this document, I am very confident I have taken it to my political group, and we had thorough discussions. I think a couple of them also wrote back, saying these are comments and things. So I am very comfortable taking this. But if I am going to relate to my, for example, the outward region, the people I work with, then probably I will transform this. That's what one has to do it.
It's about form.
So I think you can have different forms of communicating things, but I would not definitely not call this document as a techno-managerial document of a type of a thing. So I don't know. So there seems
That's a
to
longer
be
discussion. I
Yeah,
can give you a lot of. If you want to get into that discussion, we can get into it because I can.
But somewhere we need to discuss. Otherwise, these are basic concepts we are
But
discussing.
what I'm saying is basically, do we accept that the tools we use define the process, a certain kind of set of meanings, a certain set of possibilities, are always constrained or opened up by certain kinds of tools. So even the idea that we're using print has certain things it opens up and certain things that's constraining. So what I'm saying is that we have to see, my understanding of the crisis that we're in is that partly, to a large part, extent based on the tools that we have created in the world and the way we are continuously seeing or choosing not to see so many other realities, right? Particularly the scientific framing of the world, which is anti-nature, anti-life, intelligence of any other life form, that our tools prevent us from seeing those other realities or those possibilities, right? And then we move into these highly rational, highly analytical frames, which have their value. I'm not saying they don't have any value, but we have to see today, in today's world, they are severely limiting the way we are able to operate and do things in the world. And we keep our conversations, despite even saying it, are back to the same things. Roles and responsibilities, funding. Well, this is where we end up in our conversations, and this is a trap. I mean, I've only been in this world for 25 years. You guys are much longer. But I can see traps. I can learn to smell traps a little bit from being around this world. So I think, at least I'm just trying to put it out there that there's a potential trap that we are stuck in or we're walking into, and can we see it? And there are different calls throughout the day. If we can, he's talking about love. This is a signal that there's something missing from this, the way we frame this. Somebody's talking about Swaraj, which is a different, whatever those framings that people are coming with, there's something that we're going to lend us back into the same set of technical conversation. Not that we don't need any of them, but is there enough in this that takes us to the other level of conversation, which we both agree that need to happen also in this? Is there right now a basis in the document where we could say we can bring these 4 different streams together and heal and construct something collectively?
Which 4 streams?
Ambedkar, Gandhi, Marxist, feminist,
environmentalists,
the
eco-ecological. If you were at the Maharashtra Sangam, you would have seen it happening already.
The document was a moment that brought us to a place where we can have these conversations. That it provided substance to some of our thoughts is why we came into the process. that it's enriched us enough to move for more, to want collectively more, is part of that process that you mentioned this morning. And I think that's a very significant moment also, that we are engaging at a level which is deeper, that we want to see, critique, reflect more deeply, to engage with a process that sees the document as a tool to enable, but also look at other forms that we can capture for ourselves. So I think it's very significant having these conversations. So it's not either or, but what, in which context we are creating for ourselves. This is a creative process. I see that also as something that allows me to examine how more effectively one can have these conversations with the groups that we are working with in different places. So I was sharing this morning with Abha that I said the same thing, that I feel that the document is a document. It's a framework I relate to, but I feel it needs to go beyond that to make it transactional in communities, to be able to use it as an empowering tool. In our articulations, it's always about what can be empowering to place yourself in a situation that you can see yourself centered in as equal, as relevant, as part of that cosmos. So this conversation helps me to see a pathway towards that. Certainly there are no polarizations that we need to take when we're trying to discover that creativity. That's my current anxiety, that it's not either or, but that it's necessary to see the point you made about the producer and the fact that the material is also as important to creating the self. We can't reject the material just because the capitalist world has captured it. We must separate, I was having this conversation with someone today, we must separate the capitalist accumulation from the process of production. In our minds, in our ways of thinking, being, doing. Because production itself has so much value, we can't reject that. It is the doing that creates the self and the purpose of, regeneration of the self, not only in the material reality of doing, but in how your mind then gets constructed. And it's this distancing of that creates this, what Ashish and I were talking about, those multiple fingers and those kind of people who can remove themselves from the reality to create virtual people who will behave like robots because they think they've captured that in the kind of knowledge system. So for me, the doing, the production and the reproduction, and I'm saying production includes reproduction, is as significant to this process of what we want to create as a worldview, what we want to generate as that process of moving forward, to create the alternative as a reality that links production, reproduction, and our approach of nature, of self within that. Because I think we tend to forget that and say that it's out there. It's not. It starts within also. It's as much within as outside. To create that kind of holism, that we can see that within us and be within that.
We are getting trapped in a few things. One is the modalities of language, communication, symbols. That is one place where we are getting trapped, and that is important in itself. That is one part of the challenge. Another part of the conversation is again what Mohanji was responding. How are we working with the communities, doing the assignmental process, and that is not what I am referring to. What I am referring to here is that this is a core group of 30 from 30 organizations. The Vikal Sangha processes that are organized are organized in different regions on different thematic areas, and who are the participants of those Vikal Sanghas? Individuals representing specific organizations doing specific alternatives work, right? This is whom we are working with. This is whom we can have we have any chance of influencing is this group. What we do with the communities in our personal work is a different ballgame. That is not what we are sitting here for. We are sitting here for, the purpose we are sitting here for is When we do these Vikalpa processes with these specific individuals are of a certain kind. They are in some way are like our Viratri types, right? We know how they think. And some of the alternatives, some of the things that they call alternatives are still in the dominant paradigm. What we call the dominant paradigm. Yes, there is exclusion and they are working towards inclusion, but what is it they are trying to include them within? They are trying to include them within the dominant paradigm. So, the question that we are not able to ask there is this the paradigm that we want to include them into, or is there another worldview? We are not able to create a conversation for those kinds of conversation. We are not able to create a process for those kinds of conversations to emerge. We can't tell these people what to do. They are all independent organizational heads or program managers or whatever. We can't do anything. We are playing with them. We are very vulnerable. Let us first recognize our vulnerability, that we actually have no influence, no control over anything. We are operating with a lot of hope that in creating the space for conversations, if these guys can see the problem differently, that it is not about including them, but it is about completely rejecting the system. It doesn't mean they're being poor. When they take these ideas with the community, it does not mean giving the community poor. But when a new question gets seeded, that can we completely reject the capitalistic system, the globalized system, and create a Swaraj model or Gram Swaraj model or some other model with greater economical, ecological, spiritual and all the other things coming together. What is that new vision? When they take these, then they are able to now take these ideas in a different way in their own programs. If we create spaces for conversations on all the problems in the space, like when we do with the community, I'll give you an example. When we go for the first time in a community where we don't have conversation on land rights, we do a public hearing where people share their individual struggles, individual stories of land issues, and when they see commonality, they see it's not an individual problem, it's a community problem. Like that, it's a community problem among NGOs. Each of them are fighting against each other, trying to capture the space of that pie. When they see that actually we are fighting against each other and we are actually harming ourselves, that can change, and we will actually be able to arm-twist the funders. For now, we are all just, completely helpless in front of funders, lots of NGOs. So, lots of conversations are possible, which we can think of what all needs to be done. When it comes to the word technocratic, that is a kind of a triggering word. I think what Manish is saying is that word in itself is a little judgmental and it might be derogatory for someone who comes with certain values of not being technocratic. But what do you actually mean by word technocratic? It is, the way I am understanding it is tinkering, it is creating spaces of sharing of the what within the same system.
The conversation was really not about the document. The conversation was about the conversation. And what Ravi was trying to point out is that we need to go into another conversation. This thing about planning, chanting, it's okay, but we need to go deeper. We need to go deeper there, and it was not really about the paper itself or that, somehow we slipped into that. So if we can go back into that conversation, if we want to deal with that, it will be good, like Walter says. The more we have those conversations, instead of hurrying and getting into the project mode, it will help us understand the things better, Because we are, after all, trying. The fact of the matter is that there is a loss of ideology. There is no guiding principle. All that there was is in a total mess, as in a total flux in the way those things have been used and the way they have been practiced. The world has changed. We are trying to find a new set of principles, or maybe trying to realign the old principles and put it in some other form so that we understand what is happening, and therefore once we understand what is happening, what we should do. So, according to me, that is the the crux of this exercise that we have started. And of course there will be contradictions, and of course there will be things that we don't understand. The attempt is only to try and understand that. That's it. So if you have something to say, Ravi.
I really wanted to clarify, I was tongue-tied about the technocratic thing. What he's meaning, I think, is, when he says technocratic, is incremental fixes as opposed to changing the game. More sharing, more documentation, enabling that relationship without creating a space for questioning the rules of the game itself. So that is what I think Manish is referring to when he says technocratic. It's not an, I think, it's not meant in a derogatory way.
So then the process, the Vikalp Sangam process also, as to how it is falling in the trap of being managerial or technocratic. If you think so, there is fundamental misunderstanding between us and we need to sort that out. Because if it is actually that, I will be the first one to back out of this process. Now, if either of you or many of you are coordinators, you would also want to have a discussion at the end of 3.5 days on how do we move forward in practical ways. Now, if you think that half a day of discussion is actually taking us into a managerial and technocratic kind of thing, then I'm sorry, I don't quite understand this. Anybody who manages any process at some point needs to get into some practicalities. And we spent 2.5 days in the National Vikalp Sangam not talking about practicalities. And there were many people coming to me and saying, "Yaar, ye to tum upar ki baatein karte rehte ho. I just got this from the Kashmiris also. And you're not talking about what do we do? We have an understanding, let's go and do something." So, वो भी एक reality है. Now, if we start calling that technocratic and managerial, then we have a fundamental problem here in this room then of misunderstanding.
Yes. I wanted to say earlier is that we had started off with the idea of trying to identify and understand and collate information and put together all the different alternatives and all the different work that is happening in all the different spheres, right from economics to politics to environment to gender to all those things, yeah. So I think every Vikalp Sangam should happen in a place where there is a concrete evidence of some alternative taking place. How successful or not successful is not important, but that it has started and people have thought through it and have come to a conclusion and therefore have done what they are doing. And in the process, we will be able to ask them, question them, learn from that, and maybe through that questioning, answering, they will also learn from us. I think that is one process that has to be kept going with the whole idea of celebration. So I personally am quite tired of problems, problems and problem analysis, right? And this self-criticism. We get into that trip and then we are either looking at the problem outside and criticizing that, or we are looking at the problem inside and criticizing that. And we keep going into this hole, which to me does not lead us anywhere. So for us, the whole way of conducting and taking this process forward has to be on the process of appreciation. An inquiry into what has worked, what we dream will work, and look at it from there and see how to take it forward. And only that will help us to celebrate. If we don't do that, we will be forever going on
complaining, crying, getting into a morass of non-hope. The only way to do it is to be appreciated and go from a point of inquiry into appreciation. This is what I have been wanting to say.
I broadly agree with what Bablu said. I think, I mean, for example, the whole rationale that all of us are here to some extent, though we understand whatever situation we work in, that our issues related to that, how do we take this forward from an alternative pathway in things. But I feel in the listening to yesterday's and today's conversations, I was a little now, in a way, I mean, I thought probably I was much clearer why I am part of Vikalpa Sangam processes. But I've started now asking internally myself whether I don't know, I'm not saying that it's a very well thought out thinking I'm putting forward, whether I really fit into something, because whether, some of these conversations and the type of social embeddedness some of these conversations bring it in. And also my initial idea of a Vikalpa Sangam, why I am part of it. Whether the way the future is going to unfold in terms of the different Sangams, so the processes and things, whether that will meet the type of requirements or the type of need which I felt internally and socially and socio-politically to be part of this initiative. I have slight misgivings. I'm just saying it. So I would suggest, if that's possible, I would like to do that exercise. That what is that brought each one of us into this whole processes? What was our initial expectation, or what was our internal need to be part of type of a thing? And over the last 3-4 years, or 3 years or something, how that has, the way we ask the Sangam participants, whether you met your expectations and blah blah and all. Similarly, I think each one of us who are, especially in the core group, I would say that an internal exercise need to be done. Why you have come into this, what has attracted us into this, and the type of processes, the programs and the meetings, whether have they meeting this. Because I think unless we articulate that much more openly, either through writing or discussions or type of thing, when you design programs, it can mean that this whole balance which we talked about, that may not be kept in mind. I may have a particular need, Ravi may have a different set of need. For me, a deeper conversation might mean something else. A deeper conversation for Ravi or some other else might mean different things. So I think we need to, now it is time after this, something to review that and see, so that one can also give it more shaping and this whole type of balance. Otherwise, I'm a little afraid that there may be even dropouts from this, because if it is going to be driven in a particular direction, I'm not saying that it is being designed that way or something, but I feel a little bit of misgivings in the sense of some of the conversations. They're all valid, I'm not judging it or anything, but I'm also looking from my own perspective, social political context I come from as a person and as well as an organization, or what I think the role of alternatives in terms of shaping a new society and things. So I think probably we need to set up a process of articulating this personally. Why are we coming to it, and how is it moving? Does it make meaning to us or something? So that gives us some type of a basis to design our further processes and things.
I think this core group meeting has certainly been a more open space for much more reflective thinking than the previous for me. I think it's also opened up the whole idea of we are all coming from different places, but that quest, that alternate need for the alternative space for celebration and for nurturance is something that each of us is experiencing in different ways. And for me, what this meeting has also done is help me to see the yin-yang of how to transact. Even while we're in a dilemma, I'm also seeing, as just talking to Bablu, how I would like to use the spheres as a symbolic representation to transact this with community-based groups in a different format altogether, but using the substance of the document that we have so we can explore those. For me, it's open dimensions of exploring those more actively and how to take back this to the Makam network whenever we have our next meeting.